Super, and we'll kick in. Hi, I'm James. If you do not know me, I'm from Raisley, leading the education sector that we have here at Raisley. And I just want to say super welcome that you've joined us this morning. That's my morning. That may be a very different time zone for your end, as we get stuck into one of our Raisley workshops. So one of the first things we do is I'm actually meeting on the land of the Awabakal people in Australia, and just want to pay respects for elders past, present, and future. And we're really, really thankful at Raisley that we can come on board, really at the core of it, help you bring your fundraising ideas to life. And one of the best things we're doing this morning is looking at one of my favorite topics, and that is personalization. Now, this one is one that stumps people at different times. And so we're really hoping that this sort of time together just debunks some of the things that you've been thinking about or wanting to try, and gives you a lot more confidence to sort of dive into Raisley and really make your campaign sing with personalization. So just a couple of housekeeping things. As I said before, this is one of our workshops, and our workshops at the core of it are designed to at least allow you to be a little bit more interactive. If you do want to leave your video on or off today, it's completely up to you. But one of the things I would love to encourage you to do during your time is, if you have any questions during our time, please feel free to ask. I'm going to pause at sort of different moments throughout the workshop in which you can just ask any question. Either you can just raise your hand using the Zoom icon, or you can just use the chat function and I'll see that as well, and we can answer some of your questions through there. Feel free to leave any sort of emojis or any form of reaction. I kind of love this style because I get to see sort of who's actually on and what people's reactions are to the things we're talking about as well. So feel free to use those. A quick word before we sort of dive into this workshop on personalization is just to give you a bit of an overview of the other support spaces that we do have with Raisley. Workshops are a great support space. We do put our workshops and our webinars up on our YouTube channel. But a lot of the things that we'll actually talk about as well will already be represented in support guides, which are just terrific, which you can observe, and also our YouTube channel. So if you haven't actually gone to support.raisley.com yet, make sure you go there. We've categorized it in certain ways to help you absorb a lot of learning through Raisley, but also our YouTube channel, which has been up for about 5 months now. Lots of content going up every week. And it's really there to help the visual learners sort of digest some of the stuff in Raisley. The advantage of YouTube is you will also be able to access comments, which you can actually just put in any comments, and we can have a bit of a chat around that, which is a great avenue for support. But you also have the option there of just seeing sort of a wide range of our video content, which is going to be just helpful and a bit more practical for you to sort of dive into as well. Lastly, if you do get stuck, we want to help you through your campaign so you can launch with confidence and clarity. So make sure you do reach out to support@raisley.com if you are in any need. Our support team is always there to help out. And they really, really love serving those who use Raisley. So do reach out if you do get stuck on any sort of things around that. We're really, really there to help. All right, so hopefully this can be a bit of a thumbs up if we're sort of on the same page. Everyone's sort of ready, tuning in, ready to go. Yeah, thumbs up, good. All right, now I'm going to do something a little tricky. I'm just going to do a quick screen share because I want to show you a couple of different things that we're going to get into. So just bear with me just a moment. We'll turn participants off, screen share. All right. Now, hopefully you can see me really clearly, but my question is, can you see this nice and clearly? I hope you can. Just put in the chat if you can see that clearly. If you can't see it clearly, do let me know. It's just a little bit of a Zoom thing that we're just choreographing here. Now, as I said, what this workshop is all about is getting personal, and we're looking at what, at the core of it, personalization is. Within this, what the goal we want you to come out away with is that you have the ability to create unique and personalized experiences for your donors and fundraisers. And this is really sort of a core element that we do love seeing within our campaigns. And if you actually go into many of our templates, you'll already actually see this worked out. That would be, say, for example, you go into and you create a peer-to-peer campaign, and then suddenly you look into the profile page, you'll already see a bunch of personalization data in there that we do use. You also see this in messages where we want to actually personalize some things such as donor name or the different amounts. So already in Raisley, we help you make it personal, but this workshop is all about you getting the tools yourself to go even further and deeper with it. Now, we want to look at three things over this little session this morning. The first is how to use data, which we'll spend a little bit of time on. It's just a really good space to sort of get your head around. The next was we'll look at merging data, what it means to actually bring your data into this. And then lastly, we'll look at sort of three creative uses in Raisley. And hopefully within those that you'll have a real sort of clear understanding of where we're going and how to do some pretty cool stuff. But what I thought I'd do that I didn't do it in the first workshop just a couple of days ago, but I will do on this one, is I'll show you kind of where I want to take you, right? Or here's some practical hour workings that we're going to actually get to at the end of this. So you can sort of see where you can sort of take personalization. So let me switch back to my screen. And what we want to do first of all is open up this screen. Now, I've created all of this workshop just using our regular appeal template. And one of the things that we're actually going to be doing is looking at how to actually pre-fill forms. So in this donation form you have here, what we're going to look at is how you can actually do this, how you can use query strings in order to bring in some pre-filled information into any form. That's a lead form, donation form, or sign-up form into your campaigns really easily. So we're going to look at how to do that in a little bit. Another one we're going to look at is how to do avatar changing. Now, this is only a sort of a use case example, but what we mean by avatar changing is sometimes you actually may want to, say in a peer-to-peer campaign, assign people different avatars. What this is how to actually change images to react to different personalization rules. So if I simply click change avatar here, you're going to find we get a whole new monster. Now, the cool part is this page is all the same page. It's not a different page. It's the same page, but we've used some conditional formatting around here to change the image. So I want to be able to show you that as well. And I'm going to leave the last one. I'm going to leave the last sort of use case to the very end because it's a really creative one. It's a little bit complex where we sort of bring CSS into it as well. So that's kind of where we're going with it. We're going to look at using data, look at merging data, and look at getting creative with your data as well. If in the chat you've got any questions through this, please dive in. But I'm going to, right now, we're going to look at using your data. Now, as I said, I've created this campaign in Raisley already. And this little section here is only in the editor, which is kind of cool. But what we want to look at is what it looks like to use dynamic data. Now, what do we mean by dynamic data? Classically, it's data that dynamically changes based on a different input or a specific input you put in that will pull information from your database. So what would maybe call static data would just be a general thing that you've entered into that's only going to appear once for everyone. Whereas dynamic data is putting in a specific merge field in which is actually going to pull in the different data sources that are available within your database or your query strings. That's why we call it dynamic, because it changes for everyone. It's the one page or the one email, but because we use a field, it pulls in dynamic content that's continually changing based on the user in there or based on the data that you're calling upon. And so if you ever sort of hear the term dynamic data, that's what we're talking about. Something that is going to be on one page, but it's going to change as your user logs in or their experience sort of moves in as well, personally just for them. Now, the main rule is this with data, is that you can only use what you have. If you don't have it, you can't use it. So this is one of the sort of encouragements, just to be really good with your data. Understanding that that one, we want clean data, but two, if you want it, you'll need to actually capture it first. You can't just pull it out of anything. Now, we want to look at kind of where your data comes from. That's probably one of the main questions we have around this. If I'm going to get data into my site to act dynamically, where is my data actually stored? Now, at the core of it, there's two areas in which we'll store your data. The first one is your database. Now, that would be represented by maybe a lot of the system sort of data that's captured throughout your campaign. But there's also all the information based in your Raisley CRM. If you go into your CRM, you'll see a whole bunch of different data fields. And one of the ways you could do this would simply just be going back into your organization and go to custom fields And in custom fields, you'll be able to actually see the data all spelled out here as well. So you've got different sort of data categories, but all your data is in here within custom fields. So I'm going to go back to campaigns, pages. Let's open that back up. So your CRM is going to actually store a lot of the data that you're going to be using throughout your campaign. Now, one of the things we do is that we automatically, what would store, say, system data. Now, system data at the heart of it is this stuff that we know that is valuable to capture, which you can actually pull upon. There's also other things that are captured in forms. Now, classic forms would be, say, your sign-up form or your donation form or a lead form. But there's also other forms, such as the one that you filled out when you first started your campaign, which would be campaign name, your campaign goal, your campaign currency, all that kind of stuff in there that also sort of carries in for the stuff you want to see. Now, within your data, one of the important things to know is that your data sort of forms into different categories, or what I like to call different data trees. So your data is, say, for a first name, may fall in different categories. Now, there are 4 sort of classic categories that your data is stored in, which is what we call, let's say, the source for it. The 4 classic ones would be the user source, that's where we're pulling data from, or the donation source, or the profile source, or the team source. And that's kind of really important, as you don't just lump all your data in one space, but it's categorized into different sources that allows you to actually filter and use your data differently. It also gives you a lot more opportunities for that as well. There's a bunch of other ones, such as attribution, which captures all your UTM parameters. There's campaign, which captures all your campaign settings that you filled out within the form. So there's a few other ones. The best place to find this, though, is in reports. If you go into reports in Razely, you can actually look at all the different data sources in there, because basically they are your reports, a profile report or a people report or a donation report. They're kind of your sources, but if you go into those reports, you can actually see on the left-hand column that there's a whole bunch of options in there for you to be able to actually see what the different fields are available. And you can almost use any of those that are in there, as long as they're used in context. Now, the next one is what we call the URL query string. So if data can be found and used within our database, there's also this other place, which is called a URL query string, in which you can store data. Now, this thing is amazing because it's really, really, really flexible. Now, classically, a URL query string is typically used, actually, I'll go back to my thing so you can sort of see me around that. Classically, a query string is all around using, actually I'll go back into this a little bit. A URL query string is largely around using your URL to inject in that URL data that you want to be pulling on at a later date. Now, the classic example of this is always going to be social media or an email link. Now, if you are using social media or an email link, one of the great things that you can do for that link is that that link goes to your campaign page. But what you can do in that link is embed data into it. So that might be an email button that you have that links to your campaign, say razely.com. And in that link, you can then put a whole bunch of other values that are going to be able to pull in data when someone finally lands on razely.com. Now, a query string looks very similar to this down the bottom. We have razely.com, question mark, key equals value. Now, the key is really whatever you want to call the data. It's just a name for the data you have there. Whereas the value is the actual data that you're using. So let me give you an example of a good query string. Here we have razely.com, question mark, which introduces the query string. First name, which is the key, equals James, which is the value. Now we use an ampersand to add another data value, which will be email equals james@razely.com. Next one, we go ampersand, and we might go type equals major donor. Now, as you can see, we have the keys, which is first name, email, and type, and the values, which in this case is james@razely.com, and major donor. Now, if you put this in the URL via an email link or a social media link, and it takes you to your campaign, you're going to be able to pull on that data and use it for personalization. Now, a quick word on this one, you can even do something that's even better. Say, for example, you're sending a lot of emails from your CRM. If that is the case, most likely then you're going to be using merge fields instead of the value. So here I'll give another example, Razy.com ? Which is introduces the query string, and then first name equals then a merge field. Now, merge fields are different on every CRM you use. You may be using Razor, you may be using MailChimp, you may be using HubSpot, Campaign Monitor, whatever it is. You have Razy.com first name equals then username that's in there as well. Now, I've put in a merge field, and what that will do is dynamically pull in the values based on whoever opens that email. So say, for example, if Jenny opens the email, it's going to bring Jenny's name in there, not my name. So this is what's really, really helpful when you sort of start building out query strings. Now, as I said, the great advantage of query strings is they give you the ability to store data. But one of the things I would totally recommend you doing is making sure that you use a great tool like Bitly or something like that, which is just going to give you the just the ability to shorten that URL, so that when you paste it into a social media post or a button on an email or something like that, that they're not suddenly like, wow, that's a huge, huge URL, or they can actually see that URL. So using a great tool like Bitly can just shorten your URL to make it nice and simple, so they're not seeing all that hidden data that you're putting in there. Now, this with query strings is going to be really, really useful with pre-filled forms. So they're the sort of two major sources. You've got the database, you've got your URL query strings, and I'm going to pause there and open it up for any questions that people may have. I've sort of like talked a lot. So if you have any questions, please feel free. You can raise your hand now in the chat, or you can just put it into the chat as well. But any questions on how you relate with your data? Everyone's nice and quiet. Everyone feels like they've got this. Great. All right, one of the nice parts is you can actually find out everything I just said in our support document. So if you do need a bit of a recap and a visual on that, you can find that in there. But the core of it, the big rule is you can only use what you have. All right, I'm going to pause there. Guys, give me a thumbs up if we're doing well. Everyone's sort of focused. We're still in this. Happy days. All right. Let me share my screen again, and we're going to dive into the next little section, where we're going to look at, so if we're looking at how to use our different data, the next step what we want, so if we've looked at what is our data, the next one we want to look at is how you actually use dynamic data. Now, as I said, you can use the information that you have gathered in a query string or in your database. And there's three main methods to actually using this. Now, the first one is a simple hashtag. So what I'll quickly do, let's create a new one here. I can quickly show you how to actually use a hashtag. Let's put it in a heading. And you can see that. All right. So all I need to simply do is hit hashtag. And what we're going to have is a little window pop up with 10 options for us. Now, they are not all the options. There are so many more options of data that you can pull from. But the hashtag, what it does, it just allows quickly access to your database to pull in different data fields that you may want to merge through. So say, for example, if I want user first name, if I just type in use US, I then have a whole bunch of listings of new ones I can choose from. So I can go user first name, and it's going to pull it in there. Now, the great part about this is there is a support document called the Data Fields Explained, in which actually shows you all the options you have within there to find. So it's nice and easy to search. You can also, if you want a little bit of a trick, just go into reports and you can actually see the field IDs in there as well, which will give you a help. But that's a very, very simple method to use within your page builder or within your, say, emails to just quickly pull in some dynamic data. Now, classic examples of this is things like you will use like first name. So it may be you have your profile page, that you want everyone to experience. And the first thing what you want on there is it to say welcome such and such. So you can just use a simple merge field of hashtag first name and user first name, and it's going to bring that in for you. So that's kind of a classic example, but you can play with a simple method looking at the hashtag. All right. The next one is what we call the manual method. Now, the manual method really is doing exactly the same thing. It's pulling in your data. But this time, instead of using a hashtag and having some pre-selected options, this time you're actually putting in the field yourself. Now, the reason you do this is a couple of reasons. Number one, you'll need this for query strings. If you're going to pull in any data to use it within a query string, you need to enter it manually. But you'll also use this at times for for what we'll look at next, which is conditional statements. So that's kind of helpful. Now, the manual method, as I said, here is an example of it. We have user.firstname, and the core is it's surrounded by two curly brackets. As soon as you put in the two curly brackets, guess what? It's going to say, hey, we're entering merge fields here. So the two curly brackets is going to enter that. But do notice that what we have is, first of all, the source and then the field ID. So here we have the user source. So it's saying the first thing we need to find out is where do I actually pull this data from? And then it's saying what piece of data is it? So it goes two curly brackets and we go source dot field ID, then close the curly brackets off. Now, here's another little quick one. If you are using this for a custom field that you've created, you do need to enter another little parameter in there. Not only do you need to enter the source first, but you also need to go source and then state whether the actual field is public or private. Now, how can you find that? It's really, really simple. All you need to do is go back into, I'll go save, go back into your custom fields, and you can find, sorry, not custom fields, going back into your campaign. Actually, no, sorry, go into your custom fields, and you'll find here your different sort of data you'll have here. Now, one of the things here is you have a thing called field security, and you can turn this to public or private. That's what we're meaning by putting in the source and then public or private within your within your typed out merge field. So you will need to put this in. It's a helpful thing to do. By default, all custom fields are private. So if you're in doubt, just enter private and away you can go. But that is one of the things you'll need if you put in custom fields. So hopefully that makes sense if you're using that. Now, I don't use the manual method all that much. To be honest, use a little bit of a mixture between manual method and merge fields. So I'm going to show you the next example that you can use, and this is what we call conditional statement method. Now, what you can do with your data is actually make conditional statements. Instead of actually having a single value entered, such as I'm going to enter the first name of everyone here, or I'm going to enter the campaign total here. What I can do is I can give this thing now options based on conditions. Now, the 4 conditions you have, well, you do have actually 6, but the 4 classic ones are if equals, greater than or less than. Now, what you also have is greater than or equal to, or less than and equal to. So they're the options you have when you're using a conditional statement. But let me give you an example and actually dive in and look at what a conditional statement is, just to help you sort of visualize it a little bit better. Now, a conditional statement is again enters in through 2 curly brackets, and then we enter a hashtag, and then we type in the condition, and the conditions are either going to be if equals, greater than or less than, with the abbreviated versions of that. So if, EQ, GT, LT. And then space, and then we enter the source and the field ID as normal. And then we enter the value in which we're referring that to. Then we can enter our message, and then we can close the condition off. So let me give you an example just to be able to show this through. Now, I've used here an example for greater than or equal to. So I've got entered through with two curly brackets, hashtag, GTE, profile total is 1. Now, what is it actually saying? What it's saying here is that, first of all, I've now started a merge field with my 2 curly brackets, the hash, and then I've given the condition greater than or equal to. So what I want to work out is whether the data form of profile.total, so the profile is a source and total is the field ID. I want to look at whether the profile total is greater than or equal to 1. If it is, I can then give it its value. And the value is going to be, you are off to a great start. So this is a really, really helpful little conditional piece that I could put in, say, for example, if you want to have a specific message for all those who have already got off the fundraising starting blocks and they're away and going. So you go, great, off to a great start. What I can then do is do a really clever little thing called a little else statement. So if I do 2 curly brackets that type else and then close them off, I can now put an alternative. And the alternative, rather than leaving it blank, which it would be if it wasn't there, I can now put an alternative to apply to anyone who did not fill that condition. So that's really for anyone who hasn't raised $1 or more. And I can put getting that first donation is the first step. Here are things that you can try. And then we've closed it off as well. Now, what you can see here is we've closed it off with 2 curly brackets /GTE and then 2 curly brackets to close as well. Now, that's one example. Let me give you a quick other example of an equal to. So say, for example, I have a user type, and that user type is regular, that I want to actually pull the data from. So I want this to apply to anyone who has a donor type of regular. So I've gone 2 curly brackets, #equals, then user.donor type, regular, and then your regular contributions mean the world to us, and then I've closed that little statement off. Now, a little quick thing just to note on this, when you're using equals, it typically defaults to a numeric value, which is why if you do actually enter a string value here, as I said, there's a word, you will need to put it in 2 little apostrophe marks on either side. It just denotes it not being a numeric value. But what this is going to do is that anyone whose user type is regular is now going to get this little cool message saying your regular contributions mean the world to us. And then anyone who isn't a regular in the donor type, they just won't see anything. The actual field will be completely blank there as well. So hopefully you've digested a little bit around these. I'm going to pause for a moment. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see you. And we're going to have a little bit of a look at any sort of questions that you may have surrounding how to use some of your data. Now, we've looked at the 3 methods. So if you've got any questions around those, please put them in the chat or raise your hand. I'd love to answer those now.
I don't actually have any questions, but I just wanted to say a huge thanks. Really, really appreciating you guys going through this. This is fantastic.
No, pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Thanks for jumping on. It's one of these things like with using your data where you kind of need to see it and play with it to sort of really get the hang of it. But I'll look at something in just a moment. Any other thing? Helga, you have a hand raised?
Yeah, just a question, because seeing those equations on the screen really helps understanding how you build them. Are you also showing what the end result is? Are you going through an example of when you're actually using it so we see the results of it?
Absolutely. I'll show you the results in a sec. One thing I will do, I'll actually show you what happens when you get it wrong as well. Because we need to see that. Because something really quite unique happens when you do get them wrong. And so just understanding that is going to help. So yes, I'll show you in 2 seconds, but I will just wait. Is there any other questions? All right, you got plenty of time to ask questions. So if you do have a question at any point, just put it in the chat. Well, I'll make sure I get to it, but we'll come back in a little bit and do that. All right, let me quickly share my screen again. And I'm going to show you what happens when you actually get this wrong, because one of the main things I want to encourage people to do is to play. Like playing around with this stuff is how you get really good at it. So my big encouragement is make sure you have a play. You can't really muck things up too much. All right, so what I've actually done here, this little field here, I've got a really sort of cool little thing. If I go to my advanced and go to attributes, which is show is editor. So this is the actual campaign we're playing with at the moment. But as you can see, you can't see any of the stuff that we've been looking at in the actual campaign. So what I'll do, I'm going to turn show is editor off. That one, I'm going to save my page. We go back here. reload this, and we'll be able to see, is that it? Yeah, unreal, right? So this is our little thing that we saw before. I'll quickly go back. Right here, this is what we're looking at, that we're looking at before. As you can see, we have put the little conditional statement here, equals user type done regular, your contribution means the world to us. Now, what does it actually look like? It looks like this, which is pretty cool. All right, so I've actually put that in there, that the user I've got logged in at the moment within this has that regular value made for them. So that's sort of in there. That's what is going to appear when you actually use it. Now, what happens when you get it wrong? This I do at times, and if you do it, do not fret. All I'm doing now is just removing one curly brace off this. And I'm going to hit save. And I'm going to go back in to load my page. Okay, this little screen comes up. And everyone, when they see this screen, is absolutely freaking out. Now, my encouragement, don't freak out. It's almost all the time just a small data conflict that's happening within your site, that your site's trying to find something and it can't actually find it. So what do you do then? Now, as I sort of showed you before, all it was I missed one little curly bracket in my conditional statement and this appeared. So the first thing to do is go back and look at your things and make sure they're all right. If you really get stuck, reach out to support. We can do some debugging for you, but this is classically what we do to debug it. We will actually go back into your site. Let's go there. And we'll kind of go through and look at different things to see whether everything looks fine. But as we can see, there's no little curly bracket here. So now I'm using a HTML one, which typically you wouldn't. You can just use a heading one there. Let me now save that. And if I go and reload my page, wonderful, everything works and everything's looking really good again. So just a little question, a little encouragement is, at the core of it, we want you to have a play. You can't muck things up too much. You're way better off going in there, having a go. And if it does bring up errors, you can sort of go back, debug, or you can reach out to support, as we'd love to support you and help you get your confidence up and doing that. So my encouragement is create a new campaign and see how you go with that. All right, so where have we got to? First of all, we looked at using your data, that you can only use the data you have. Now I've looked at how you merge data within 3 steps. You can either use the hashtag, you can use it, a manual one, or the last one is that you can use, or you can use conditional statements as well. One of the things I didn't mention, which I'll quickly just refer to on the using your data, is how to actually pull in query strings, because it's really quite helpful. As I said before, you actually use the manual step here for query strings. If you want to bring in data from a query string, you need to assign the source as query. So I'll give you a quick example of that. If I just go and I'll add a new heading.
Sorry, James, can you share your screen? Thanks.
Oh, sorry, yes. Thanks, Helga. Legend. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to add a new heading. Let's just put it down. Let's just stick it there. That will do. All right. Let's change the color so you can actually see it. Now, again, what we're doing is looking to pull the data that's in our URL query string. Simply 2 curly braces, query, dot, and then whatever the field ID is. So for example, if it was first name, it may be that. Now, what this is going to do is if I now save that, that's going to, this little field is going to look to the URL, see if there's a key called first name, and if there is, it's going to import the value in on that. So relatively simple, but I'm going to show you a practical case of this on how this is used. So that's just an example of how you use query strings rather than the database on the manual method as well. So hopefully that helps. Okay, let's get in and show you some examples. Now, 3 creative uses that we continually see people sort of want and or need within Razely, sort of from the easy one to the hard one, is, first of all, it's pre-filling forms. Next would be using your block settings to put merge fields in. And then lastly, how to actually use merge fields within CSS. Now, pre-filling forms, let's give the use case for it. The classic use case for this is always going to be, you have a great campaign going out to your database and you're sending an email. Now, within that email, you have all these people's data available through your CRM, whether it be Razorly or whether it be another one. And so you can actually create from that email a button which links to your campaign, which contains a whole bunch of data within the query string like we were talking about before. Now, in your query string, you may have first name, you may have donor type, you can really have whatever you want. But within that query string, what you can actually do is use that query string to pull in data by default into a form. So how would I actually do this? Well, the first thing is what we want to be looking at is we go back into your settings. So if I exit here and I go into my settings, and I'm going to look at my donation form. Now, in my donation form, I've got a bunch of amounts that we have here, which is fantastic, all good. But I want to go to my fields. I have first name, last name, and email and message. So let's have a quick squeeze at that. These are the fields I currently have here: first name, last name, email, and message. Now in here, all I need to do is put a merge field for query strings into the default value. So as you can see down here for first name, I have query.firstname into curly brackets. What this says is that the default value for that field in my form is going to look first into the URL to see whether that is available for me. And if I just put that query field in there, I've done that for first name. I've also done that for last name. I've also done that for email. All of that is already pre-filled in there. And all I would need to do is hit save. And I'm going to actually find those values. I can now use them. So as I said before, this is our campaign that we currently have that doesn't have the special link that has the query string. So what I did earlier is I created one. If I scroll down a little bit, here it is here. As you can see, it's highlighted. What this little button here is, it's the exact same campaign page, but now what I've done is I've put in a query string that has a whole bunch of information for my form to get pre-filled. So if I simply click this, as you can see up in the URL at the top here, there's all this new data. If I now go, I select $50, fantastic, and now my form is completely pre-filled. Really, really simple way of using dynamic content to enable sort of a user experience to be very, very simple and quick. So I can sort of see people use this a lot. You can use it for lead forms, sign up forms, for whatever forms that you'll be needing to use in there as well. So hopefully that is a great little example that you can see on how to simply pre-fill forms. Now, and as I said before, feel free. We will have some question time in a little bit if that if there's a few sort of things in there. Georgie, there's a question here. Can you only pull data in to personalize content, or can you personalize the donation amounts? Oh, this is a really good one. I'm going to get there with donation amounts. This one sort of came up before, and so yes, you can totally do it, and I'll show you how to do it. But I want to get to the second example, so use case example. So the first use case example here was pre-filling forms. The next one was using merge fields in a block setting. Now, why would you do this? I just want to show you that it's an option for you, which is kind of cool. So what I'm going to do is just go to a different page. I'm going to go to my profile avatar page. And this is my little one with this guy here, right? So let's quickly go here. As you can see here, I've put in a couple of little merge fields and things in there. I've got a little conditional statement that I'm using. But classic, what I want to look at here is if you're running, say, a campaign that's focused on schools or for kids or whatever, and you wanted to give the kids an avatar, for example, and to give them an avatar, you want them to have the option of what avatar they choose. So when they've signed up, they may have a little drop down. They can choose their own avatar, what monster that they want. And I've created two monsters for this. I've created Harry and I've created James. Now, if you have that data in there, that you know what their monster is because that's what they filled out in their form, you can do a really cool little thing with an image, with an image block. Now you can see here that the image isn't coming up, but this is actually an image block. If I open it up, what I've actually put here is a conditional statement to say if the person's monster is Harry, then I want the image to come from this source. Then else get it to come from this source. Now, the main reason I show you this is that you can, this is a great little space in which you can just know that within Razor, you have freedom to put in conditional statements, merge fields, all of that into your image block settings. There are a few little fields like URLs in this that you can do that with, which is super great. And it makes a great little shortcut for different things as well. So knowing that that's in there, this is what is the result. This is the actual default picture of James, that if there's nothing in there. But if I actually have someone where the monster is actually Harry, now Harry the monster is going to come up, which is super cool. So that's a quick little way of how to using things like the image block to be able to put in conditional statements or merge fields into the URL field there as well. So really, really helpful. Now, let me dive back. I'm going to go home. Okay, so that is 2 examples. Oh, I completely sort of went past this as well. If you haven't yet played with your little flip tiles, make sure you do. All right, they're kind of cool on the new campaigns. This isn't default with the appeal campaign. I've sort of made this myself, but that's a good little example of a flip tile. If you haven't used that little block yet, it's kind of cool. Just go into there and type in flip, and you can see the little flip cards there. So anyway, just in case you haven't seen that. Now, the third creative use is using the attribution field in your for your CSS purposes. Now, this is probably the most powerful tool you'll have, but why would you use it? Now, let me show you a quick example of this actually in action. As you can see here, I have my regular campaign, which is great. It's got an orangutan as the background. I'm just going to refresh this so I'm not in the form. It's got the orangutan in the background, and that's all good. Now, what if, for example, you want to create a unique experience where the actual design of your site changed by the personal preferences that people actually put in? The cool part is you can totally do it using CSS, but the question is, how do you do it? Let me give you the example. If I scroll down to the very, very bottom here, I've made a little link here that's going to actually change the view of this site to a personalization setting. So if I open it up, okay, what I've done is I've logged in as a user. Now this user, instead of getting an orangutan, this user is now getting an entire new background. Now that is all controlled through your CSS. It's a mixture between using your data and your data in your database and also CSS as well. How on earth do you do this? Now I'm going to quickly just log out so we can use this page again. Wonderful. Now, the first thing I want to be looking at is I want to be using the attribution field. So I'm going to go up to this actual section that I've been playing with. Here it is here. This is the row that we've been using. And if I open here, the row, and then go advanced, and then go to attributes, you will see here that I've actually changed the rows the rows class to include a merge field. Now this is super, super helpful, which means that what this class will do, it will look to your database or even your query string if you want to use that instead. And it's actually going to find that value and use that value within your class. That way, when you go back into your CSS, let me just close that off. I can now put in some CSS code such as this. Hero row, which is what this row's class is, And then, as I said, the data field I'm looking for is Harry. And then row background, and I've now put in CSS to change this in there to enable that background to completely change. Now, that may be a little bit gobbledygook. I am doing a video on it as we speak, and so I will be putting this on YouTube very, very soon. But all I'm showing you is this. You've here put in a custom class of a value called Harry. But what you're doing is you're associating that class now with this row by using attributes and a simple merge field where the value here will be Harry. So it's an incredibly powerful tool to be able to actually target different different elements on your site to then go into your CSS and completely change. Now, here's the question that sort of came up. How on earth would you do this? Say, for example, for your donation buttons. Now, here's a cool little use case. Say, example, you have two categories of donors. You've got minor donors and you've got major donors. And you have those in your database laid out, and there's a little data field that equates each to whether they're a minor or whether they're a major donor. What you can then do when you're releasing your campaign to all of them is that you can, knowing that data that's there, you can change your donation buttons to appear one set for minor donors and another set for major donors. Question is, how on earth would you do this? It's actually really quite simple. If you know a little bit of CSS, but we can get around that as well. I'll show you some of the tricks. Now, at the moment, as you can see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got 6 buttons here. Now, I don't mean to have all those 6 in there. If I go back into my settings and go into donation settings, so
James,
donation,
can you back share?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Helga. You're the best. It's so funny. I totally often forget. So what I'm doing is let me go. No, I'll skip ahead to this. So what I'm going into settings and go to donation form, and what I can see here is I've created a whole bunch of button amounts. What each of these button amounts is, I've given a custom class to, is minor amount or a minor amount, and the 100 is minor amount. Great. So they're the 3 buttons I want to appear. They're the 3 donation buttons I want to appear for donors who are minor. Then what I also have is I've got 3 amounts for 120, 180, and 240 that I want for major. So I've given them a custom class of major amount. See, major amount and major amount. So all that's saying is now I've associated each of those buttons with a class that I can now play with in CSS. All I need to do is go into Pages and go into Home. And I'm going to go down to my donation form. Here, if I go to Settings and go to Advanced and go to Attributes, I can now put in a merge field of user private donor type. And what that is, that's going to pull in the value, which is a custom field I've made, of whether the value is going to be major or minor in this person's records. Now, because I've done that, I can then enter some CSS to do it with. So if I click this and you then go to CSS, I can then enter some CSS code. Now I'm making this one up a little bit. I meant to prepare this earlier, so I'll make sure I put this code into the video's description as well so you can see it. But it will be something like this. If we go donation form, and as I said, what we want to look at is we want to say that donation form also has the class of major. And then it would be, and then I want to pick on the button that I've chosen. So it would be, what were they? It was major amount. Then it would be, I can then put in display, none, that. Now, what is it? What is this going to do? Now, I think it'll work. It may not work, but I think it'll work. Sorry, major amount, that's all. What this is going to do is going to look at the donation form, which is a class for the donation form. It's going to see whether that also has the class of major, which is what I've pulled in for my through my merge tag. Then it's saying for the buttons, major amount, display, don't display them at all. And so if I go save this, I wonder if it works. I'll give it a go. Let's see what happens. No, I totally didn't work, but it does work. It's just my CSS. So I'll spend a little bit more time on the code and actually upload that code. But you can actually target each of these buttons in there as well through that simple way of, again, associating the donation form with an attribute class with a merge field, and then using the donation button custom classes to really fine tune that down. I'll sort of tidy this code up so you can actually see it at some point as well, which may be a bit more helpful. Hope that's good. All right. They are 3 examples. I'm going to stop talking. It's 8 o'clock. We've hit an hour. I'm going to put it back to stopping share, and I want to open it up to anyone who may have any questions in regards to everything that we have just looked at. I feel like I have been running full tilt at conditions and merge fields and data and all of that. So please let me know, do you have any questions? Helga, you're always guaranteed for a quick question. Fire away.
I always have questions. So you gave some examples of the if and then. So, for example, with Harry and Larry, what was the other name of the other monster? But let's say Harry and Larry. So that is clear. You know, if it's not this, then display that. Can you have also where you have 3 or even more options? So there are 4 avatars people can choose from. And if so, would you be able to share an example of something like that, how you would construct that equation, maybe in the support article or whatever, so we can have a peek and replicate it?
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting when you want to have more than one. Now, typically within conditionals, you can only have 2. There's only 2 versions you can have, right? It's either this or this when you're doing conditionals. If you wanted more options, that's where you actually do need to play with CSS. So whereas that option actually gives you all this flexibility, that really the options are limitless to what you do with it. I'll give you a really classic example. One of our favorite campaigns that launched recently. Helga, you're doing this campaign. This campaign is unreal, right? With Sweat for Pride, what they've done is that each person who signs up also picks a trainer. Now they have 4 options of trainers they pick. And this whole great concept is, oh, I love it, Helga. Yes, bring it. This concept of training is a great one, because what it's doing for the person who's signing up for this peer-to-peer campaign is it's helping them feel a bit more of a solidarity and support, and gives them a bit more motivation. So before the sign-up form appears, they pick their trainer. And it's just a button. Now, what that button does when they click, it takes them to a form where their trainer is already pre-selected, which is really, really clever. But the way they've actually done it is they've actually styled the sign-up form with their individual trainer. It has the little headings all changed, the colors have changed, the wording's changed for it, simply by using CSS in there and merge fields. Because what they've done, that person pre-selected an option, so they can now, that's now a piece of data that I've now got from them, and they've used that data to actually then style out 4 or 5 different types of sign-up forms based on who they actually did. Now, the cool part is they can then completely style the profile page to include that trainer and not the other trainer images. So that's a great example of really where the options are limitless. When you're using conditional statements, it's typically just 2. You can do a couple of little tricky little things, such as you can do calculations within in that, which makes it a little bit more finicky. But typically just look at the conditional statements as 2 options. If you want more options within your page builder, you will actually need to use CSS. And so I'm super keen to help upskill you and get people sort of a bit more confident around that, because really what I've done with the monkey is just change the background. You can change the entire site experience by using some CSS around that. Hopefully that helps. All right, any other questions? All right, I think people have done pretty well. We're 8:03. I've gone a lot shorter than I did last time, which I'm slightly nervous about, but hopefully we haven't missed too much stuff. Now, what's going to happen after this? One of the actual cores of our workshops is that these give you a taster, but also the confidence to go in and do it yourself, which means that all of this is going to be uploaded onto YouTube so you can have a bit of a revision. And you'll also find on our YouTube, within the description, a whole bunch of links to help you find the right support documents or the right different other videos to help you sort of flex your muscles when it comes to personalization. A big encouragement is to really give it a crack. If you give it a try, you can't fail too much. And if you do, we always encourage you to reach out to support@raisley.com, as our team's really here to help you bring your fundraising ideas to life. So if you have any obstacles, we want to help you over that. Now, that's the personalization. At the moment, there is some content up available on YouTube on that. There's a couple of pieces that are going up later this week as well. I hope you guys have enjoyed this workshop. We're really hoping that our next workshop's actually going to be all around ticketing, which is a release coming very, very, very soon to Raisley. So if you haven't heard about that or seen about that, make sure you do subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can be first to be updated around that new release. It's going to be a real cracker. Thank you again for joining us. If you do have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to support. We are here to help. Otherwise, check out our support docs, check out YouTube, check out our new website, but most of all, check out your campaigns, get building and enjoy creating, fundraising and growing in Raisley, and I'll see you again next time. Lovely to see you all.